I am going to turn the event over to one of our board members, Joan Bachmeier, who's been invaluable in this process. She put this whole thing together and has done a fantastic job. I want to really thank you for your dedication, not just to this, but to the St. Francis community. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joan, and she will begin.
I'll just start right with the history of the Catholic Church. Okay, and it starts with the fact that the Catholic Church in the Black Hills was built, the first one was built in Deadwood in 1877. So we've been around for a few years. Several priests served short assignments. Father Peter Rosen from the Holy Cross Society in Notre Dame was assigned as pastor of Deadwood in 1882. He also served missions in Sturgis, Fairview, Fort Meade, Galena, and other places, but basically in the hills here. Sturgis is, in the early days, a church in the early days was held in various homes, as Mass was an essential for those Catholics.
Do you need light?
A little bit light.
All right. How about that?
Yeah, that's fine. As those Catholics who had arrived after the gold rush in 1874. So in August of 1879, Pope Leo III appointed Martin Marty the vicar apostolic for the Dakota Territory, not just South Dakota, for the whole Dakota Territory. His consecration as a bishop took place the following February 1880 in the parish church in Ferdinand, Indiana, near his abbey. His new territory, Dakota Territory, now comprised of 150,000 square miles with a population of 124,000 people, but that included 14,000 Catholics. And on meager resources of both material and personnel, when he only had 12 priests, Marty devoted a great deal of effort to recruiting priests from the East and from foreign countries. Within 5 years, there were 45 priests in the entire vicariate, with 82 parishes and 62 missions. And 6 of those 82 churches were in West River country. They were in Deadwood, Meade, Galena, Central City, Sturgis, and Rapid City, right here. Bishop Marty first visited the Black Hills in May of 1880. A delegation of citizens went to Fort Meade to meet the bishop and escort him to Deadwood. As a token of their appreciation for Bishop Marty's concern and for his care for them, they sent him a pictorial cross and a chain made of Black Hills gold by a local jeweler, Edward King. And the cross was 4.5 by 3.5 inches. And it featured mine-cut diamonds set in 14 to 18 karat gold, and the chain was made in a rope pattern. Marty was quoted as saying, "On my return from Conception, Missouri, I found this beautiful cross and chain, which shall ever belong to the pastor of the country from which its material came." And in 1882, a frame church was built next to the cemetery on property given to the Catholic Church by Judge Henry Ashe. With the blessings of Bishop Marty, vicar apostolic for the Dakota Church, this tiny Prairie Gothic church was started by Father James Gleason, who was the priest in Deadwood at the time. Possibly for this reason, the church was called St. James. It was completed under the direction of Father Sheehan. And if you see it on the board here, it's that little tiny church on the very right-hand side. And the rest of those buildings, the 3 in the middle, are the 3 from the academy. And of course, you recognize the courthouse. So actually, that was taken to the courthouse. And the church was not the thing they were taking the picture of. But then anyway, then on the inside of the church, this is a picture of the inside, and it's quite small. You see there are like 6 people on each pews on each side. Anyway, in 1886, Father Rosen was transferred to Sturgis, this time as pastor, not as missionary. Since the people of Sturgis were predominantly German, he soon took over the ministry from Father Sheehan, who moved to Meade. Father Rosen's enthusiasm and zeal in furthering the cause of the church created financial difficulties which were to follow him throughout his career. He borrowed money, bought property, and incurred bills which somehow had to be paid. Many fairs, subscription drives, and donation requests were held in Sturgis to keep up with the expense in the church. Father Rosen bought bells for 3 of the churches in his jurisdiction, including Sturgis, and the bells for St. James Church was in the freight depot for many months before it was paid for. When it was finally redeemed, an impressive ceremony was conducted to mark its installation. Pope Leo XIII established the new diocese of Meade in western South Dakota on July 28, 1902. St. Patrick's Church in Meade became St. Patrick's Cathedral. Then when Bishop Starr was consecrated on October 1902 for the Diocese of Meade, Archbishop John Ireland, who had kept the cross after Marty's death, granted him with the cross. And that cross has been used by every successor to this very day. Every bishop has used that cross. The cemetery was next to the little St. James Church and was also established in 1882. The first bearer was a baby boy, February 28, 1883. There are several babies that have been buried there with unmarked graves. But there's an area to the left as you go through the gates, and that's the first picture on the left, and that's where most of the priests are buried. However, the one on the right is an area where most of the sisters are buried. And as of now, there have been 1,260 persons buried in the cemetery. And then after that area was full, in 1981, this area on the bottom shelf, bottom picture, was opened and burial was there. And that's the area down by Main Street. And after that area was full, the area between the chapel and the cemetery, which is on the left-hand picture, that area was opened in 2003 for burials. And there are between 10 and 12 burials each year, so the area will probably have room for 20 to 30 years. And that area right in front of the grotto is where cremains are buried. And this one on the right-hand side is Babyland, and as you go into this cemetery, you go straight into the cemetery, and as you turn to go down to Main Street, it's right on your left there, and that's where most of the babies are buried. Okay. The grotto outside the church was created in the early 1920s. It had a flower garden on each side and a bench for easy meditation and prayer. Now there is a decorative rock instead of flowers in the garden. The grotto was made of natural stone and petrified rock from this local area. And Father Peter Rosen, along with Bishop Marty, believed that the hope of the Catholic Society lay in the youth of the community. So school was a priority. With the permission of Bishop Marty, Father Rosen traveled to Switzerland and invited a group of nuns to come to the Black Hills. They agreed, and 5 nuns arrived in Yankton in 1988, where they spent a year learning the language and the customs of the area. Within 10 days after their arrival in Sturgis in April of 1889, they had started a small school in the Sage building. I don't know what that is, but it's on LaSalle Street, and they only had 31 students. But by summer, work on a new school building was begun. The building committees consisted of Father Rosen, J.D. Davenport, Max Owen, Michael Golden, Charles Francis, and James O'Neill. And you might recognize some of those names. Bids for construction were received June 26, 1889, with the cornerstone laid July 7. By 1890, the school and the dormitory were built, and by 1891, the convent. The 3 buildings were of sandstone acquired from a quarry north of Sturgis, owned by Judge Henry Ash, who had become a close friend of Father Rosen. And this land was also contributed by Judge Ash. The first building is the school, and then the convent is in the middle, and then the convent, the dormitory is the one on the left. Father Rosen was transferred to Minnesota in 1891 and was followed by a succession of priests whose tenures were brief. In 1896, Father Michael Quinlan was appointed pastor. He remained in Sturgis for 6 years, and he died in 1902. Then Father Clement Breckenzer, who was ordained for the Benedictine order in 1893, he took the name Columban, and from then on we always knew him as Father Columban. And he came to Sturgis in 1903, and his temporary assignment lasted for 43 years. And soon after taking over his pastoral duties at the parish, Father Columban and the Board of Consultants made the decision to buy property for the church for a new church, as the parish was outgrowing the St. James Church. The land originally given to the church by Henry Ashe was now owned by the Benedictines of Sturgis. James O'Neill, one of the consultants, bought 7 lots from C.C. Polk for $1,050, and he was repaid by the parish. This property was held for 46 years and eventually came right here. This is the property he bought, and became the location of St. Francis of Assisi Church. And you know, this is their own thing to say, but there never seemed to be enough money to build a church. And you'll hear that many times. There never seemed to be enough money. Father Clement, who served the parish and the nuns, believed a temporary solution would be to construct a chapel next to the academy to serve the nuns. The parish could pay a nominal rental fee to the sisters, and the parish could also use the church. So following legislation which provided for religious corporations in the state, the local parish was incorporated under the name of St. Aloysius Parish. The excavation began in May 1911. Henry Brooke, an active member of St. Aloysius Parish, was superintendent of its construction. Plans for the structure estimated to cost $25,000. Pretty meager, seems like. Anyway, that included a full basement to be used as a gymnasium and for social purposes, plus a large boiler room. It was a poured concrete structure, a relatively new building concept at that time. A building known as the Columban Hall was on the corner of 4th Street and Main Street. And this building was used by the school as an extra gymnasium, sometimes for a special dance or a special banquet or a basketball game, or just whenever you needed a large room for a purpose. I know that the senior prom was held in 1953 because I went there with my boyfriend then, Luke. Anyway, we went there for the prom in 53, and also I was told by someone who went to a banquet there in 1945, I don't remember who it was now, but they said it, but I believe it was connected with the prom too. Funds were hard to come by, and the sisters solicited money throughout the diocese and went begging at least once a month. They sent letters to New York and Brooklyn in 1912 to ask for funds. Anna Bush, St. Paul, Minnesota, the bishop's mother, donated $10,000 in honor of her deceased daughter, Josephine. Now, the cornerstone was laid August 15th, 1911, and the chapel was dedicated on January 1912. Bishop Bush, assisted by Father Columban, laid the cornerstone. And they had the Sturgis band, the fire department, the city officials, and approximately 500 people at that groundbreaking. And in the cornerstone, they had a document that read, "To the eternal living and the true God, and in honor of St. Martin, the patron saint of the church, under the glorious pontificate of Pope Pius X, Ordinary Right Reverend Joseph Bush, Bishop of Meade, Pastor Reverend Clement Breckenzer, under the administration of William Taft, the President of the United States, the Governor of the State of South Dakota, Robert S. Vesey, and the Mayor of the City of Sturgis, Willard E. Lamb." And the cornerstone was solemnly blessed and laid according to the Roman Catholic pontificate by His Lordship, the Right Reverend Joseph Bush, Bishop of Meade, assisted by the citizens of Sturgis. After the cornerstone laying, a banquet was served where a new novice played the piano and sang. As a novice, screens were placed all around the piano so she could be heard and not seen. And who do you suppose that novice was? Sister Clement. And I'm sure you've heard of Sister Clement. She died at age 89. But from 1912 to 1974, she taught music at St. Martin's Academy to hundreds of students both Catholic and Protestant in Sturgis and later in Rapid City. Sister Clement also played the piano for dances in the school. And this is the original altar that was put in that church when it was built. And now on the next slide is the new altar that replaced the original altar in the new church. Was a gift of Louis Grubel II, who had immigrated from Bavaria in 1886. Grubel gave Father Columban the money to travel to Bavaria to purchase an altar like the one he remembered in the church in Bavaria. And that was in 1919. And it's a very beautiful altar. And now, in 3 years before that, in 1916, the murals were added to the church. The story is that a gentleman stopped in and asked for work. He said he couldn't draw or anything, but he could copy anything. And so Father Columban gave him a handful of cards, holy cards, and his name was Stahl. Well, scaffolding was built, and Mr. Stahl laid him on his back and he painted the ceiling. And this is some of the things he did in there. You see the little round places? There are 4 of those on each side of the ceiling, and those were basically put apostles in those. And then there are 3 in the middle that are called murals, and one of those is the Assumption of Mary, one is the birth of Jesus, and one is Christ in glory with Mary and St. John at Jesus' side. And the words on Jesus' book says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And also now in the side chapels, on the left side, on the right side is St. Joseph's window, and on the left side is Mary's window. And the mural on the left side of the chapel is a picture of the death of St. Scholastica. And on the right side of the chapel is the death of St. Benedict. And those are very nice too. And I didn't take pictures of those. There was a lot of things to take care of anyway. The school is located to the east of the church, and then there's a church, and then the convent is to the west of the church, and then the dormitory orphanage is to the west of the convent. The infirmary part of the convent was on the 2nd floor. You could go straight from that floor to the top floor of the church altar as they were attached. And when you entered that part of the church, there was a screen, so you cannot see those that were seated in the 2nd floor when you are in the church. All the buildings are connected by underground tunnels, so you could go from one building to another without going outside. So now we're in May 16th. John Bachmeier was enthroned as the 3rd bishop of Meade. He was determined in his promotion for rights for minors. And during his administration, the see was transferred from Meade to Rapid City on August 1st, 1930. St. Mary's Church on 5th Street in Rapid City became the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception. Now, in 1929, we're back at St. Aloysius Church now. In 1929, the pipe organ was installed in St. Aloysius Church. The keyboard was upstairs in the choir. Sister Pauline was the organist, and her back was to the altars, so she had to put up a mirror to see what was going on at the altar. After the chapel was built, the parish paid $500 a month to the nuns for the use of the chapel. The small St. James Church was moved to New Underwood, where it was enlarged, remodeled, and is still used by the community. Now, an altar society was organized very early in the history of the Catholic Church in Sturgis, and there's no set rules for an altar society. Each parish makes its own rules except for personal credentials. The altar society is symbolic of the Holy Women of Jerusalem, and ordinarily the altar society members took care of the altar linens, cleaned the church, furnished flowers, and sewed for the altar boys. But in Sturgis, all those activities were done by the sisters. So the altar society there was mainly formed to make money to help defray expenses as St. Martin's and to save money to help build this parish church. And dances were a regular thing, and bazaars were held which lasted several days with big meals each day and dances at night. Various ways of raising money, all of which took lots of work, were done by the altar society, but there never seemed to be enough money to help the sisters and to put enough toward the start of the badly needed church. and many of the children sent to St. Martin's were orphanage, and no money was available for their keep, so funds were always needed. The school was St. Martin's, but the church was St. Aloysius. The rules for the Elder Society were quite strict, almost like those of nuns. Although society members were allowed to marry, members must be communicants, attend church services almost under any circumstances, be modest, be very ladylike, a law-abiding citizen, and dress in a very modest way. They must also be obedient to their husband and to all church rules. Usually the eldest member, the most pious, was the chairwoman, and there were no elections in those days. Many assistants were provided to help Father Clement. They include Father Robert Reddy, Father Wilbur Beck, and Father Henry Huber. Father Innocent was at Sturgis at the time of Father Clement's death. With the assistance of Father Gilbert, he guided the parish through the difficult time of the transition. Another priest who was very instrumental in guiding the spiritual lives of the people of Sturgis and the students of St. Martin's was Father Basendorfer, pastor at Bearbutte for many years. Father Clement died on April 20, 1946, and at least 5 priests entered the service of God because of him. Father Clement was buried in St. Aloysius Cemetery, just behind the grotto, and there is a place there that says Clement Park, and that's where he's buried. Father Joseph O'Rourke was appointed pastor of St. Aloysius, and he faced the task of establishing a parish separate from St. Martin's. Funding for the new church lagged. The people simply didn't want to leave that church. They were very comfortable there, and they just did not want to go. Father Leo O'Doherty was appointed to help Father O'Rourke with the task of making the move necessary. But 4 days after the arrival of Father O'Doherty, Father O'Rourke suffered a massive heart attack, and he was not able to return to his priestly duties. So Father O'Doherty administered the parish and continued raising funds for the building program, eventually building the fund to close to $40,000. Father O'Doherty was never officially appointed pastor of Sturgis, and when the new pastor, Father Leo Furbach, was appointed in 1949, Father Leo moved to Bearbutte, where he continued his service to the diocese for several years. And now, Father Leo Furbach lived in the Brandt House on the corner of Sherman and First Street before the church and the parish house were built. Father Leo arranged financing through the alma mater, through his alma mater, the Pontifical College of Joseph in Worthington, Ohio. He bought more property and adjoining the lots acquired so many years before by Father Clement and built the St. Francis of Assisi Church. Now this house, there's a lot of things said about this, and I know they talked about this Friday at the Bichon family, that they were talking about it as history at high noon. But I have heard 3 different stories about that besides that. And one was that Father Furbach lived there, and that it was the parish house. And then another one is that, no, he just boarded there. And so I don't know which is right, but I do know that he lived there.
I gave that speech on Friday, but they said that sometimes they let the males from St. Martin board there too. Like,
Oh, yes.
males.
That's, yeah, I had heard that when I was younger, that several of the boys lived there. And now, groundbreaking for this new church was on July 23rd, 1949. And if you see that picture up there were a lot of people there. The Bishop McCarty was the bishop of the Diocese of Rapid City, officiating at the blessing and placing of the cornerstone of the Church of St. Francis of Assisi. The cornerstone was donated and engraved by Carl Anderson of Sturgis Monumental Works. And I wonder if that was Carl Anderson, if he had any affiliation with Anderson Stingley Funeral Home, but I'm guessing that he did. And when completed and furnished, it's estimated the church will cost in the neighborhood of $150,000. That's quite a bit more than the 25,000 of the church up there at St. Martinsville. And if you look at this, the two people in the front on the right-hand side, there's a little boy right next to him again. That man is my father-in-law, and that little boy is Luke's youngest brother. Anyway, the new church was completed and dedicated on March 20th, 1950. 2 months later, June of 1950, Ramona Doran and Virgil Britton were married in the new church. You probably know her as Ramona Saunders now. Father Monsignor Furbach continued the building program with the addition of the rectory and the garage in 1954. The rectory was built to accommodate 2 priests. There's, if you've ever been in the house, you notice that there's an office on each side, and there's 2 floors to it. So they always thought that Sturgis was really growing. It would be a bigger church, and we were definitely going to need 2 priests. Well, that never happened. And the statue of St. Francis was placed on the lawn in front of the rectory. As a personal note, my husband Luke and I were married in the office of the rectory shortly after it was built. It was built in 54, and we were married in 55 in February. So it was brand new when we were married there, but that's just Luke. So then Father then built a school constructed in 1964 on the corner of First and Sherman Street. And so the Brand House was torn down so the school could be built there. And the school served grades 1 through 6. He also bought lots across First Street for the playground for the pupils of the school. After the school closed, that playground was used as a parking lot, and it's still a parking lot over there. Before the school closed in 1970, the church organist, who was Ann Waller at that time, and assistant choir Mary Ann Rasmussen, taught music to the students. It was during that time that I started playing for church as a substitute for Ann, when she wasn't able to be there. The organ we had at that time had no pedals except the volume one, and only one manual like the piano, so if you played the piano, you could play the organ, so that's where I started. Monsignor Furbach had 3 masses on Sunday morning. The ones at 6:30 and 8 were little masses with no music, and at 10 a.m. was high mass, as they were called at that time. That mass had an organist and a choir led by Roy Farrell. Pat Michon was first put to play the organ in those early days of the church. And then after she left, after Valerie left, or after Pat left, then Valerie Millick started playing it. And Valerie Millick, you probably know as Valerie Millick Hawkins. And she played from 62 until 64. And then she went to college. And then it was just Ann Waller and me. And it seemed like that was when I really became involved in the church and being in the music program. And then I joined the Elder Society in 61, and having a husband on the building committee and in Casey's. It seemed like we were always involved in something. So from then on, it feels like this history is my history too. I feel like I've lived it all. Anyway, now we are back at St. Martin's in 1956. The school closed at the end of that year, but the students who would be seniors that year were able to go to school and graduate during the summer, and they called themselves the graduates of 56 and a half. The high school reopened in the fall of 56 as an all-girls school. The grade school that was built next to the high school in 1950 at St. Martin's was kept open until the new school at St. Francis was built. And this new school, it looks like this is all one building, but this isn't. That's the old school behind it. And this is that new building that's up by the courthouse now. And that was the grade school at that time. And it had 3 classrooms in it. There was one for first, second grade, one for third, fourth, and one for fifth and sixth. And that building was sold to Meade County and was used as a 4-H building. The 7th and 8th grades were able to finish their school in the high school building. In 1962, St. Martin's closed again. The sisters left Sturgis to go to Rapid City for a new convent, much to the dismay of Sturgis. And the sisters sold the property to the Diocese of Rapid City for $1. And so a goodbye celebration was held at the city auditorium. Then the years between the time that the sisters left in 62 and in 64 when St. Francis School opened, the students grade 1 through 8 were taught by the Sisters of the Handmaids of the Precious Blood. St. Francis Church was able to keep the cemetery. The St. Martin's facility was then used by an order of priests who cared for ailing priests. They were called the servants of the Paraclete. So meanwhile, construction in Rapid City was going on. A new cathedral, and it was the Cathedral of Our Lady of Perpetual Help. It began with the groundbreaking in the winter of 1960. The cornerstone was laid on Easter Sunday, April 2nd, 1961. And in August of 62, the first solemn pontifical mass was celebrated by William McCarty. The cathedral was dedicated on May 7th, and Bishop McCarty died on May 7th of 1963, and Bishop McCarty died in 69. So then Bishop Harold Dimmerling was ordained as the 5th bishop in Rapid City on October 30th, 1969. And you wonder why we're interested in bishops? Well, they're really an integral part of our parish also, so we are always interested when they are there and when our cathedral was built. And then Sky Ranch now received the title to St. Martin's property. It was in 1972. And Wingspread occupied it. Wingspread is a halfway house for youth at the Sky Ranch for boys that was established at Sturgis in 1971. It is an extension of the Youth Rehabilitation Sky Ranch at Camp Crook, South Dakota, for boys between the ages of 10 and 18. It was originally established in 1965 at Belfouche by the late Father Don Murray, but was moved when the larger facility of St. Martin's became available. So the name of Sky Ranch and Wingspread, it kind of sounded like a plane, and it was. And Father Murray used it because he also used to be a pilot, and he had a small airplane, and he took the boys with us sometimes. The South Dakota Retail Liquor Association then purchased the land for the halfway house known as Wingspread. The Retail Liquor Association from other states have donated funds for the complete renovation of the former academy building into dormitories and office space. And the convent and Earl's dormitory were both torn down in 1973. And the Knights of Columbus had leased the chapel basement for club rooms in 73, shortly after they were organized. And then in 1980, 7 years later, fire destroyed the remaining building, which was a high school. So now they asked the Knights of Columbus to please vacate the club rooms. Sky Ranch requested that. The basement was then used as a temporary quarters for Wingspread. And they built a large house across the street from the chapel. And that was later sold for an assisted living home that was operated by Ron Anderson. And the only building left was the church. And in 1982, a committee met to try to restore the chapel. But Sky Ranch had title to the property, so the committee contacted Father Kudel, who was in charge of Wingspread at that time, due to the death of Father Murray. The committee asked if they could lease the chapel, and he said no, it was not in the best interest of Wingspread. So the committee kind of fell apart. Then in 1987, St. Aloysius Cemetery Association required title to the chapel, and a new restoration committee was formed. But they didn't have any money. Rita Farrell was also part of that committee, and in 1989, she applied for and received a $4,000 grant from the State Centennial Committee. This grant became seed money for the beginning of the restoration. The committee solicited money through correspondence with St. Martin's Academy. Alumni, V.J. Scott was President Emeritus of Mutual of Omaha, and he had attended St. Martin's through the 8th grade and was a former altar boy at Father Clement. He contributed $50,000, and so the restoration was ready to begin, and the committee was pretty happy about that. So the first big expenditure was the roof in '89, and then the heating system. The pipe organ was repaired and refurbished in 1992, and the restoration continues up to this present time. The Benedictine convent and school that had moved to Rapid in '62, and the Sturgis was left without a Catholic school, first time in 73 years. The parishioners built the St. Francis School and operated until 1970. But with escalating costs and the shortage of teaching nuns, and of course the closing of the school. And so now we talk about St. Francis Church because we've discussed the building of the church, the rectory, the garage, and the school. And now we'll talk about the Alder Society. It started when the church started. And they're a real viable group with lots of church work as soon as the church was open. In addition to the banquets, lunches, card parties, and bazaar, the ladies had to attend to the altar linens, the church cleaning, and the old boys' cassocks, and dozens of other greater and smaller jobs depending on keeping a church clean and neat. And now they didn't have the sisters to do everything, so everything was left to them to do. And I can remember when I first started the cleaning committee, everybody's name, every woman was named after, put on alphabetically, we put the first 8 names, and you have these this month. You will clean every Saturday morning, we'll come and clean the church for the weekend. So we did. The Altar Society had women's circles who met in small groups in the homes of the members. At one time, there were 10 of those circles, and now we're down to 3. They worked together to serve funeral luncheons and serve wedding receptions, and receptions of first communicants and those who were confirmed, as well as other duties. There were a large number of the bazaar, where they were a large part of the bazaar that was held in the city auditorium. There was a cakewalk, a fish bond, and a huge big meal. And food, always food. A supper was held in the church basement to finish off the day. And after they had been over to the bazaar all day long, the women were cooking here, and then they served the supper, and then there was cleanup, so they didn't get home until quite late that night. But in the spring, there was the spring luncheon on St. Patrick's Day. That was a big deal. There was a chicken and noodles dinner. And when the school was open, the luncheon was held in the school gymnasium instead of the church basement. The school had a full kitchen with a large stove, dishwasher, refrigerator, dishes, and so forth, so the children could be fed at lunch during school. And while the school was open, they were always short of funds. So several of the older ladies obtained the use of a small building on Main Street, and it was right next to the hardware store, Lunchbox Hardware, and I believe it was a plumbing shop at one time. Anyway, it didn't have anything in it for several years, and so the utilities were not on. And so, but they had a rummage sale every day. It was basically clothing, and people donated stuff, and so it was. And they, the building, like I said, there was no utilities on it, so they sat there every day with no heat, no electricity, and no water. And they were just one, or maybe sometimes two of them, mostly there was just one of them there. And winter days were shorter than other days because it got dark earlier. But they helped make money for the school. And the Altar Society also had a yearly card party in February, close to Valentine's Day. And that was luncheon with sandwiches and cookies served in. Each year we had a weekly rummage sale in the church hall here. And that was, it didn't take a whole week for the rummage sale, but it took all week to gather stuff and get it marked and everything, and then sell for 2 or 3 days. And we raised a fair amount of money that way. The Altar Society was for the women, but the men had an organization called the Holy Name Society. And once a month they came to church as body and sat in the front pews and received communion as a group. Some of the members were the Altar Society, altar servers for the Mass. And they always went at 8 a.m. Mass because the 10 o'clock was always so crowded. And they were big out during the bazaar also. And one of the things that I can remember that they did was the Christmas decorations. And they had life-size statues, for sale anyway, and big tall candles about this size, and they put those out every year. Before coming to Sturgis, Father Purbach was pastor in Helsing. He was elevated to Monsignor in 1951. During the time he was in Sturgis, the Saturday night Mass was added as a choice of Saturday and Sunday. And the 6:30 a.m. Sunday Mass was eliminated, and we went to church either Saturday night or Sunday. Vatican II was in 62 to 65, and before the time Monsignor Furbach left, he had instituted some of the changes of Vatican II. So Mass was now in English, and readers were introduced. And if you remember the old missalette that had the Latin on one side and English on the other side, well, we didn't need those anymore because now it's English. So in 1971, due to failing health, Monsignor Furbach retired from active service. He died in 78, and he's also buried in St. Aloysius Cemetery. Well, now we get Father Vallow, and he succeeded Monsignor Furbach as parish priest of St. Francis. And he came to the Diocese of Rapid City from his hometown in St. Joseph, Missouri. And his mother came with him and served as his housekeeper. He was given religious garb, originally designed for Father Clement, as they were about the same size. And he had served in Hill City before coming to his assignment in St. Francis in 1971. He brought enthusiasm and vibrancy to the parish, and changes in the church directed by Vatican II were quickly implemented, and a parish council was formed. A new religious education, he had one for each grade instead of putting, first, second, and third always had their religion classes on Saturday morning, and then Saturday afternoon was release time classes, if you could remember when those were. Kids got out of school a little bit earlier, came to the church and had their education, but the older kids, they were given, all the girls were in one group and all the boys were in another, and that's where the religion classes. Well, now he had a class for each grade. The decoration of the church was completed, and air conditioning was added to the church. And this is a little story. I got to tell this because I think it's so funny, but anyway, our fire lock was right behind here, and it had an open, not scared, what am I saying? Railing on the front of the church, and the organ sat this way, so you could see from the organ, see the altar pretty easy. Well, then they put the air conditioner in, and it went right behind that railing, and it was about this wide to put all the duct switch in there, and you couldn't see very well. But one day Virginia was up there practicing, and you know, at that time the churches were open all the time, and so she was playing, and she couldn't hear what was going on, and there was carpet on the floor instead of tile, and so it was pretty quiet walking around. And this fellow comes in the door, goes up there, and he gets up just about up to her, and he says, "Hello?" And I thought she was going to jump right off the organ bench. Anyway, she decided that we needed to move the organ. So they moved the organ and turned it around this way so that it was heading to the back of the choir loft so that nobody could surprise her again. But that seemed like a good idea, but you couldn't see over the organ, so you could see nothing. You were completely blinded. And so there again, we put a mirror up, and the mirror was sitting behind you here, and so you were playing, you were looking at the mirror. But anyway, that was the way we solved that problem. And so then, anyway, Father Vallow removed the back altar, and the new altar that let the priest stand behind and face the parish while saying Mass was instituted. A risen Christ statue was installed in place of the prior altar. Okay, this was the original altar that was in this church. And you see that he put the risen Christ up where the crucified Christ is, and took that whole altar out. And this next one is not as clear as, no, go ahead, one. This one isn't as clear as I'd like to be, but you could see the risen Christ up there. And the other altar, you know, the rest of it was taken out, and it was wood behind him. Anyway, it was done very tastefully, I thought. And this was the main change in the altar. However, the rest of the altar was completed very tastefully. The communion rail in front of the altar was also removed, and a new organ was purchased. It had 2 manuals, full pedals, and so here I could do something. So I took lessons to learn to play that. And Virginia Hardy had joined the church at this time and was organist, so she started playing also. And that would, this was before the time of the air conditioning. And Ann Waller's husband had a change in employment, so he left town and shortly before Virginia started, so there was just the 2 of us. And the Sturgis Knights of Columbus was organized in March of 1972 during the time Father Vallo was priest. They have been a very visible and helpful addition to the church. They had a big part of the annual bazaar, and they have a huge rummage sale during the time of our bazaar. They have pancake breakfast for the parish, welcome hot dog suppers for the beginning of the school year for CCD children, have Easter egg hunts, and help in any way possible on other projects. Their Valentine's Day steak and lobster dinners were greatly enjoyed by the members of and their guests. A large amount of men that belong to the Holy Name Society now join the Knights of Columbus, and the Holy Name Society had become quite inactive. And it was about this time, just about a year later, 1973, that the diocese decided the parishes all needed to know what was going on, so they started the West River Catholic in May of 1973. And it was a newspaper sent to every household. And if you could pay for it, fine. If not, you still got it. And they send an envelope with it if you would like to donate to help defray expenses. But everybody still gets that newspaper. Father Vallo had 1 Saturday evening mass and 3 on Sundays to accommodate the large parish. And Virginia Hardy and myself covered the 10 a.m. mass, and she started playing at 8 o'clock every Sunday, so she played sometimes 2 times a week and sometimes just 1. So during the time that Father Vallo was a priest, he bought the land across the hall right here from Howard Street. And if any of you older people remember that creek that used to go there, there was no road there or anything. And so they decided if they put a culvert in there, covered that up, we could have a nice parking lot. And that's where that parking lot came from. And if you notice, that block of the street is wider than one on either end. On either side of that block, you will notice that there's parallel parking. Well, this one, there was really not a very good way to park there, so they decided while they're making that parking lot, they just move the street back a little later. We could have a lot better parking on the street too. And it seems like each priest has given something to our parish. Father Vallo was a bit of an artist, so he used that to remodel the front of the church. The altar was decorated for Christmas with matching trees. He had 2 trees on each side, and I swear they almost looked like they weren't real because they just were just perfect. And when he put the lights on, they were perfectly put on there too. And he celebrated his 25th anniversary of ordination in Sturgis. Father Vallo resigned his pastoral duties in '98 because of health. After a recuperative leave of absence, he became pastor of Fairview and chaplain of Fort Meade. And then comes Father Richard Platt. He served the parish from 1980 to 1985. He was a native New Yorker and had been in the diocese for many years before coming to Sturgis. He had a great affection for the elderly. And I remember so many times him saying, please go visit the elderly, they're getting lonesome. And he encouraged laymen to participate in the permanent diaconate program and saw the ordination of the first lay deacon minister, Roger Hyde, in Sturgis. And he was ordained in September of 1984. He served until he moved to Sioux Falls in April 2001. And Father Platt saw the need for expansion of the church and laid aside funds for a new building project. It took 46 years to go from St. Aloysius Cemetery to St. Francis, and now 35 years later, we're looking at a new church. During the time Father Vallo was pastor, he had a phantom bazaar where funds were donated by Christians instead of having a real bazaar. But Father Plant says, no, we need that full bazaar. He felt that the idea of fellowship and working together meant as much as the money. New diocesan directives which shortened the tenure of pastors in communities caused his transfer to St. Teresa's Parish in Rapid City. But at Christmas time, it seems like everybody did something a little bit different. He had a Christmas tree of poinsettias, and it was layers of poinsettias. It was built like a Christmas tree. And it was very different but beautiful. So then we had Father Ray Dyche, came as our first native South Dakota to serve as pastor, Sturgis, following his ordination. In '62, he served for a brief time under Monsignor Furbach. In his return to Sturgis as pastor 23 years later, in 1985, he was welcomed by the parish. He came from the most recent assignment in Meade. He drove right in, getting the fundraising accelerated in the actual building of the church. Each family was visited by a pair of parishioners, and a lot of those were the building committee, and asked if they would pledge an amount to purchase one of the special items, or would they just like to purchase so much a month or give a nominal fee or whatever. Anyway, they had given a price to like the altar, to the baptismal font, to the lectern, whatever. Maybe you wanted to buy that particular item, then you gave that amount of money. Otherwise, you could say, just use my money for wherever it needs. I'll give you so much a month for whatever, or I'll give you $1,000 and use the power. Anyway, that was one of the ways they raised money. And the church was smaller than it was originally thought to be because we could only borrow so much money from the diocesan contingency fund. And this area was supposed to come out farther, and part of that area was, this end of that hallway was supposed to be part of this building so that our hall would be bigger, and also then the other end would be a bigger entryway. Well, that had to be cut down, so that was the way it was. And one of the fundraisers, and this was done after the church was built, was a casino night. And one night was a dinner theater, and they served a luncheon or a dinner, and some of the parishioners did the theater, which was a Broadway type play, and it was held in this church hall. And he also tried to get the parish more involved and set up several committees, including the building committee, the education committee, the committee to schedule different ministries, and music committee, and others. He introduced using greeters instead of ushers. And also, after, I don't remember just how many years it was after the church was built, but one of the parishioners that had been visited was in a nursing home, and he died, and his wife had died before him. They didn't have any children. He left his money to the church, and he paid off our church. Father Dyche had come from Meade, and when Dr. Berry first grew up, he grew up in Meade also. And he played the organ since he was in grade school. And when Father first became superintendent of the local school, Father Dyche immediately said, we need you as an organist. So of course he obliged. And now there are three of us, there's Virginia and Barry First and myself. So in 1985, the folk group was organized, and so adding them to the three organists, that someone was there to lead the singing for all four masses. And I don't know if you remember in the 80s that as church music was more contemporary about that time, and more guitars were used instead of organ. It was just a different type of music, but it was different. But it was also all over the country. And then the music ministry was introduced at that time as the National Pastoral Musicians. And that organization met 4 times a year with other musicians of the diocese to basically learn from each other and new ideas of what you're trying, what was looked there. Anyway, the folk group consisted of Jerome Bigler and Nikki Huggins as guitars, and Myron and Vicki Gold, Delia, Kelly Donahue, and Michelle Bigler. When we moved to the new church and there was no room for a piano, the Pope group added a piano player. And they were Becky Bradley, Jerome Hoff, and Beth Geffler at different times. Beth Geffler became a regular piano accompanist, and she and I did organ piano duets often as prelude or as interlude at community times. Well, now we're to the groundbreaking of the new church over there. And it was done at noon on August 28th, 1986. The building was finished in 1987, and the dedication was held on November 20, 1987. Brian Sorensen, a local parishioner who was studying to be a priest, was ordained deacon in the new church even before it was dedicated. He was ordained in August of 87, and in November of 87 is when the dedication was. Brian was ordained to the priesthood along with Gary Oshowski at the Cathedral of Cathedral of Our Lady of Perpetual Help in Rapid City. And now we only have 3 services on a weekend because our church is big enough. We don't need that 4th one to accommodate all the people. And a couple of weeks ago, Dennis and I were watching the VHS tape of this dedication. And and if you'll notice, this is the north wall, and this is right behind the altar. And look how white it is. There's nothing on it. It just seemed so different from what we have now, and I just couldn't help but notice the difference. And the only thing that's on that wall is, on that north wall, is the tabernacle and the candle beside it. And maybe it was because it was a brand new church and there wasn't time to decorate it before that, I don't know. But anyway, I couldn't help but notice the difference. And then the stations were on the wall behind the pews on the south wall. The risen Christ and the organ were brought from the old church to the new church. That was to give you some continuity between the two. And the gymnasium part of the school is now part of the church. And the old church was remodeled to become the parish hall. The altar area became the kitchen, and the dishwasher and the large cook stove from the school were brought to the kitchen. They were an area next to the gym, so had to be taken on anyway. The dishwasher is still in use, but a gas stove replaced the electric stove from the school. It was very expensive to use as we were on demand. And if you know anything about electricity and demand, you know if you've got one thing that costs you a lot, it costs you a lot for everything. The Alder Society bought a large commercial refrigerator, and the Alder Society, we had designed the kitchen, and it was not supposed to be this wide. But right here, there is one step that used to go up to the altar, and this was all a concrete floor, and then had the step up in this, and they said, if you try to bring the altar, or bring the kitchen farther back, you're going to run into all kinds of problems. So that's why the kitchen is big as it is, and the hall is that small. The choir area was closed, as you see it is now, and used as storage space. The school, the church, and the hall are all connected. And while they were doing that, they decided to connect the priest's house too, so you can go from his house all the way through it without going outside. As the Altar Society was now using the new hall up here, the Knights of Columbus started using the basement as their club rooms. And now Bishop Timmerling was a celebrant at the Mass for the dedication of the new church on November 1987, but died shortly after that. Matter of fact, a month later, he died. So now we have the 6th bishop, and his name is Joseph Chaput. And if you look at his picture, he looks like a little boy. He looks like he should be in grade school or something anyway. And then, about that same time, Father Malloy came to our parish. He came from faith in 1989. During the time here, he focused on liturgy and music. And he started a liturgy committee and taught our committee about picking hymns and how to use music to enhance the Mass, and also taught us about the Mass itself. All the accompaniments were part of his committee, as well as the choir leader and the chairman of the committee. We had a book that we had a lesson out of every liturgy meeting. We had a liturgy meeting once a month, and he taught us a lot about the liturgy and how what was proper and everything. Although we had several different groups that played and sang for Mass, Father Malloy suggested we all use the same Mass propers, the same hymns on a weekend, so people would get used to using the same, they get used to all of them. Vicki Bradley was no longer available by this time. She used to play with the little group, and the Beavers moved out of town. And as 8 a.m. Sunday morning was not very well attended, Father decided we only needed one Mass on Sunday and one on Saturday night. So we had a big church, and it seemed to be that we could accommodate everybody, so that was on. So that made it kind of nice because she got a weekend off every other weekend. Father Mike obtained 2 sets of hymnals. He had one traditional and one contemporary, and he encouraged the people to sing. He purchased an electronic piano and had a hymn board built, so instead of announcing the hymns before they were put, they're all posted up there, and you know when they come up, so you know what to sing. And he set up other committees. Some committees were already there, and he just continued them, and some were new. They included the liturgy, the building, the parish committee, evangelization, community life, hospitality, music, altar service, lectures, Eucharistic ministers, funeral ministry, and environment committee. And one of the new ones was environment committee. And they are the ones that decorated the altar for each season. And and then he also said that that long wall that I told you was so empty, it was still empty, and all the stations were, the 14 stations were behind the pews at this end. And so he took 7 of those and put them on the other wall, and it made it not so proud on this wall, and made the other one have something on it, and it looks a lot nicer. Different colors, and he also added those long cloth panels on both sides of the altar that really made a difference too, and those different colors were hung according to the church year. And he also instituted a youth director for the first time. And once a month, high school had a gathering of CCD members instead of 11. They had a fun evening or games or something. The CCD classes all met on Wednesday evening, with our school not having enough room for kindergartens through 12th grade. Father Malloy had some of the larger rooms, especially ones upstairs in the school, divided into 2 rooms. And the Altar Society used some of their funds for this project. But Father Malloy was a liturgist, and he wanted each service to go well. So when there was a service or something extra or special or something like Holy Week, he would have everything written out, and you're to be here then, and this comes on now, and now there's music, and now there isn't. Anyway, everything was written out, so you didn't have any problems with what's going on, and that was really helpful when you had a special service. And also, he had a flair for dramatics. He put on several plays during his time here. One was Charlie Brown. Another, he wrote the script and picked out the music, and the parishioners played the parts. I believe that one was for his 40th anniversary. Most were done as a fundraiser, as the church always needs money. Every year on Good Friday, we had a special way of the service. And they built a huge cross, and they had the high school boys bring it in during the reading of the Passion. And they were led by other, maybe younger classes. And they had camels, and they led this church. And then as they come in the hall, they went to each of the aisles in there and sat down. And so we had some light in there. And those candles, they were seated next to the house, and then after the Passion was read, it was a time to venerate the cross. It was done in partial darkness, because then the choir sang all during the veneration. But the special skylight was turned on at a time before that, and it gradually got brighter. So when it came time for communion, it was bright, and the candles were extinguished, and everyone went to communion light. And then we left quietly. Father Michael always made sure that it was liturgically collected to do this. For these type of services, he had the choir led by Myron Vogt, most of the cantors, and any of the other musicians who would be there, as well as some of the parishes who just wanted to sing. And Dr. Barry Furs was, of course, our main accompanist, but some of the rest of us did help out too on some of those special occasions. He wanted to make the church more friendly, so he moved the tabernacle into the daily chapel. And the church is expected to be quiet while the host is in the tabernacle in the church. So by moving it to the daily chapel, people are encouraged to greet their neighbors and visit a little bit. And during this time, Ed Gravel was ordained as a deacon in 1993 and served until his death in 1997. Now this is Ed Gravel on the right. And he served, I think, for 4 years, and then he died. And Father also, he started a funeral luncheon committee, separated from the Elder Society, because the Elder Society had always served all funerals, and they were having trouble coming up with people. And so that was a committee of not necessarily women, it was couples, men, women, whoever would help serve the luncheon. Well, then after the death of Mrs. Rogers in 1985, her house was right behind the garage over here, and it was faced Sherman Street, but it was in line with the garage and the house, and so, or with the garage, I guess. And after the parish bought that house and tore it down, that squared off the property. So it was not this way, it was squared. The remaining lawn behind the rectory was taken out, and that area was added to the area for Mrs. Rogers' property, and that made the L-shaped lawn that we, parking lot that we now have. It came from Howard Street beside the garage and all the way down to Sherman Street, and parallel across Sherman Street to behind the garage and the rectory to the new part of the church. Now we have 3 parking lots. And to begin this latest parking lot was rented out as weekly spots for the rally. And then later on it was rented out as just, daily spots. Father Malloy offered the police department a quiet, cool place to have lunch served by the Elder Society during the rally. It started out as a lunch of hamburger sandwiches, homemade salads, and homemade desserts by the Elder Society and served by the Society. It later became a full supper time meal served by the Elder Society. The police preferred that evening meal. And now all 3 lots were rented out during the rally. And the Knights of Columbus took part of this newest one over here, and the other 2 were worked by the parish members. And that is to this day a great fundraiser for the church, both the meals and the parking lot. And then Father Malloy loved Christmas. He had several trees decorated in the house. And matter of fact, 1 year he had a tree in every room, including the bathroom. 1 year he invited all the parishioners to come through and see his trees. And so a lot of them went through there, and then they came over here and we had cookies and coffee and stuff for him. And almost everyone went to see him, but they were really something to see. I remember one of them was all decorated with jewelry. One of them was a Disney, and I don't remember what the others were, but anyway, each one was very interesting. And during his last years, he was here, Bev Keffler moved out of town on us. And then, and also, because that he liked Christmas so well, he built the crib, and it was just inside the door as you go into the church. He built the crib there and set all the features there. And that's what this picture is. The crib is on the left-hand side. It doesn't show up very well, but there was a little bit of a roof over it and the sides on it, and then all the figurines. This is a big picture of figurines, and we used that for many years. And when the crib was not able to be used anymore, we used this part, and it was really nice for the kids as they came in. It was down low so that they could see all the features there, and they really enjoyed it. And another thing he did was he sold Christmas ornaments. He had a different ornament every year, different color, different ornament. The first year was the one of St. James, and then there was one of the convent, and one of St. Aloysius Church, and then one of the St. Francis Church, one of the house, one of the school, and then he was transferred. And so we never got the new school until Father Wachowski came. But then anyway, after Father Malloy was transferred to the Cathedral of Petrohal in 1996, then Bishop Chaput was also appointed to Denver, Colorado. So now we have another new bishop and another new priest. And so the new bishop is Blaise Sturgis. And he was ordained for the Diocese of Rapid City in July 1998. And Father Wachowski came to Sturgis in 1996. He was a very humble and thrifty person. He was an avid Green Bay player, Packer fan, and he got lots of teasing because he was so good at that. And he took care of his health, and he exercised a lot, and he was always a runner, always running. He kept the parish running very smoothly without making many changes. He encouraged everyone to work just by his example. Most of the work, you know what that is. Most of the committees continued during this time with us. But Father Wachowski served as pastor until 2002, and he did the last ornament of the church over there, so we had the complete set. Roger Hyde had moved to Sioux Falls by this time. Ed Gravel was deceased, so we were without a permanent deacon again. And Teresa Niket started playing the organ she started playing the piano during the time Father Gary was here. And Pat Shearer had also become a piano player. But by this time, Virginia was no longer playing, so that left Teresa, Pat, Barry First, and myself. Now, the next person that came was Father Arnold Carey. And he came to St. Francis Church in 2002 and stayed until 2014. He was appointed pastor of Newell also, and that was the first time that Newell had been part of our church too. Although the restoration of St. Albans Church, now called St. Martin's, was started in 1982, Father Carey was dedicated to see the restoration continue. The property had been sold to Skyrush in 1972, and during the time that they owned it, the chapel was used as a basketball court. In 1980, the last of the three buildings built for the Nazi school had burned, and in 1982, the restoration was started. And some St. Martin's alumni were instrumental in getting the project started. There were fundraisers to help with the project, which the polka mass and the German dinner was a very popular one. But Father Carey played the accordion for the mass and led the choir and the congregation, and another priest was the mass presider. Then the German dinner was served. The cemetery committee and the chapel restoration committee had several soup suppers after Saturday night to raise funds. Several memorials of church members' funerals were to the chapel and the cemetery. But Father Carey purchased the grand piano with a donation from Flora Kranz, who gave it to him for something special. But Father Carey started the practice of having Memorial Day Mass and midnight Christmas Mass at St. Martin's. And talking about Christmas, Father had a thing for the children's Christmas Mass. He brought Bucky with him to church with the Christmas children's Christmas Mass. And the first time he came there, he told the story of how he went to they were at a store and they had sold toys. And you've seen there where they always say, "Press me," and the toy does something. Well, he come to this doll and this toy sang to him. And he thought that was so neat. And so then a few days later, they went again, and his sister said, "You can't do that. You can't keep playing with that." But she bought it for him, made him a priest's outfit so he could take it to church. So when it came time for the sermon and all the kids were sitting around the altar, on the altar steps, he brought out Bucky, and we expected him to say Christmas song. He sang "Happy Birthday." But we thought, well, that's okay because it's Christ's birthday. But it was something a little bit different than we'd ever had before. you know, like I said, each priest does something different and gives you some memories. And also other things going on at St. Martin's were a few weddings and funerals are celebrated there. And he had a temporary altar installed in front of those back altars to celebrate Mass and facing the people. And he also obtained a bell from Sky Ranch for St. Martin's, and because the sisters had taken the one from St. Martin's to Terra Sancta when they moved there, and they put it in the new church that was built in Terra Sancta. And he also had the parish use the breaking bread missal. And we still use the contemporary songbook, but most of the hymns that were in the traditional songbook were also the new breaking bread, and some of the new contemporary hymns are in there also. And then in the fall of 2003, the property just next to it, this house here, just set right next to us here, and it was moved out, it was bought, and it moved out to East Main Street. And the property was leveled, and it really hasn't done anything too much to it. It was used as overflow parking if needed. And it was originally thought that it would be a good place to have a parish picnic, but that has not ever materialized. And now in 2003, Valerie Hawkins moved back to town, so she started playing there. And then he brought the tabernacle back from the daily chapel to the main chapel, and he had Father Dyche build this stained glass, I don't know what he called it, window background, whatever, and he placed it on the wall between the altar and the hymn board. And you can see it there on the left-hand picture there. Then on October 4th, St. Francis feast day in 2004, the St. Francis Church dedicated this statue on the right-hand side of St. Francis, which was sculpted by Dale Lampert, and is placed in front of the church. If you notice, it's out there in the little green as you come between the two doors. The present bishop of Rapid City, Bishop Chaput, was appointed to Spokane, Washington. So it was announced in 2011 that we would have the 8th bishop, which was Dr. Robert Wayne Bruce. His episcopal consecration took place at Rushmore Plaza Civic Center on July in 2011. And Father Carey retired in 2014 due to health. And it seems like, we have several priests that retired due to health. I don't know, we must be really hard on them. And then we welcomed Father Timothy Castor in 2014 to both St. Francis and St. Mary's as pastor both. He came from Rapid City. Father Timothy introduced us to a new missal. It's called the Pew Missal. And it's a little bit different. Well, not much different, but some of the songs are different in it. It is more traditional than breaking bread. And we are still using it, and we still enjoy it. When Father Timothy arrived here, there were 5 of us that come in. In 2017, I retired, being 80 years old and doing this for 50 years, I decided that's enough. So during the next couple of years, Valerie moved out to the eastern part of the state, and Pat moved to Indiana. And so now we are left with Dr. Perry first. Because Bev had moved, Teresa had left town, and Logan Rennick was no longer playing. So you might say we went from feast to famine as far as the covenants are concerned. And Father Timothy noticed some items that need placement right after you got here. So he bought new priest's vestments, books, chalice, monstrance, and a communion bowl. And also, the organization of St. Vincent de Paul took place in 2016. And now comes the COVID disease. All kinds of problems, it seems like. It came to our country in 2019, and many people died from it, and many were seriously ill. But some were lucky and didn't get it that bad. It is compared to the flu epidemic of 100 years ago. It came to our area in the United States in March 2020, which closed the schools and churches, and people were asked to not gather in groups. So the diocese suspended the obligation to attend church in person due to concerns. So we in the Diocese of Rapid City went to church via live stream. Father Timothy set up a chapel in his house every morning, prayed Mass for the parishioners on Facebook. Blaise Geddes was his altar server and helper with the broadcast. Obviously, it had impression on him as he is now a seminarian. During the time the schools were closed and churches were closed, Father Timothy had Sunday Mass at St. Martin's with one organist, one cantor, one lector, one altar boy, and a camera person, plus himself. The Mass was live streamed on Facebook. After the mandated closing was lifted, Mass was back at St. Francis, and those who wished could come back, but it was not mandatory yet. Father continued live streaming the Mass for some time, and those who decided they would like to come back, they were spaced out. You sat at every other pew, and you sat an arm length apart. And we had communion under one species. And then the schools opened in the fall of 2021, and the Diocese of Rapid City announced that the general obligation to attend Mass on Sundays and holidays of obligation would be reinstated effective March 27th. So they closed it in March 20th the year before, and then in March of 2021, they opened up the church again, and things were kind of back to normal. And then they appointed Bishop Goose as Saginaw, Michigan. And so now we have another new priest, and it's the 9th priest, it is Peter Meade. And he was ordained in July of 2020. I don't know, you can see it real close there, that he's still wearing that cross that we talked about real early. And this, the old garage on the property next to us where that house was torn down, that garage was torn down, and this new garage is larger and I'd say probably more practical maybe. And then the property, let's see, and that was sold in the new larger campus. And the new building was closer to Sherman Street due to the fact that that creek that ran across here, it went underground across Howard Street and over underneath that property there, and that's considered floodplain now, and so could not build up next to Howard Street. The creek under the tabernacle that started on the north wall, then moved to the David Chapel, and brought back by Father Carey to the main church body, is now in Westendale, and the stained glass background was built by Father Deitch. Then Father Timothy, this year, put it on the black back wall there behind the altar. And you can see this is really different from that first blank wall that we were seeing. And he removed the risen Christ and put the traditional Christ up there at the top of the peak up there. And he made the altar smaller because it almost overwhelmed the whole altar area. And then he bought a new statue for the stained glass background, I guess you call it. And you can see over here is the organ, the piano, and the grand piano is right in front of it. It doesn't show up very well, but it is there. But anyway, that's what our church looks like now. And so then we were blessed, we're now blessed with 2 new deacons. We have our Deacon Tom Murray and his wife came to Sturgis from Marytown, New Jersey in April of 2021. He was ordained a permanent deacon in the Diocese of Trent, New Jersey on May 12, 2012. And he started serving here as a deacon of St. Francis and St. Mary's in July 2021 after receiving permission from our bishop. He became the director of faith formation in August of 2021. Our second deacon is Deacon Brian Paulson, who was ordained on June 29, 2023. And he came to Sturgis when he became assistant police chief in 2022. He and his wife moved from northeast Nebraska, and his first Mass was July 22nd, 2023. Then Bishop Meade died February 2024, and so now our 10th bishop will be ordained He is announced as Scott Bullock in June, and he will be ordained actually tomorrow at the cathedral. And Father Timothy had ordered this new statue, and there's a better picture of it now on this here with Scott, and that's the new bishop that will be. And it arrived and it was dedicated on Tuesday, July 16, 2024. Restoration continues at St. Martin's. One of the things that stands out is the front doors are changed. And they did something, they leveled that ground somehow. But you used to, as you went from the sidewalk, you went down and then you had to go up steps to go in the church. Now you go from that sidewalk straight to the church, and it is so wonderful for the people that have problems with steps. The addition of the concrete patio out there is really an addition, and there's little benches there you sit there, really nice. And then inside, Father Timmy has also removed the portable altar in front of the back altar. And he also had a pulpit built and installed, and you can see that on the left-hand side over there, the pulpit. And he has daily services on Saturday morning at St. Martin's, but regular Saturday and Sunday morning services are here at St. Francis. And so far, now other items that were not mentioned that are done, that have been done, finally they are, here we are. Interior walls are repaired and painted. Electrical wiring outlets are repaired and installed. The floor tile is removed from the sanctuary. The floors are finished and the main aisle is carpeted. The pipe organ is repaired and furnished. The old communion rail is buckled and repainted, and I think that was from Fairview?
No.
No? Okay, I'm sorry. Ignore that.
It was donated from a church that closed someplace in the area. I can't recall.
Okay, it was donated from another church, Michael says. The baptismal font and pews were from Fairview. Well, that's what I thought. Church was acquired, from the Immaculate Conception, the church was acquired and installed. The new furnace is purchased and installed. The restroom was added. One stained glass window was repaired and installed. All the windows have new finished outside over the top of the stained glass with double insulated glass to keep it from deteriorating. Foam board insulation was put on all outside walls with a new stucco finish over that. The north wall is not done yet, but it will be done this fall, hopefully. The basement was completely gutted, including the floor, as there was water damage there. A new concrete floor was installed and the basement windows were replaced. The roof has been redone and brought back to good shape since it was done in 1989. The furnace has been upgraded and the air conditioner added. The cemetery has had several upgrades too, as far as several roads have been blacktopped. The sidewalks are either repaired or new. A sprinkler system has been installed in the cemetery. And then the bell tower, when it is repainted, it will be installed on the front patio, and the bell will be hung there. Now, Father Timothy has kind of, I guess you would say, he has a new tradition because we've done it 2 years in a row, and that's the beginning of tradition. But on Sunday, Corpus Christi Sunday, we have a procession from this church up to St. Martin's, and then he carries the host up there, and then we, after prayers, then we have our picnic lunch. And all those, everybody follows him. And those that can't walk that far, you can either drive up and meet him up there, or go to Saturday night mass and go up there. And so, and that's the end of my story. I have several pictures back there that if anybody's interested in them, yes.
I have one little aside. Clint and I were married in this church 57 years ago today.
I got some pictures of it in that room car in here, and I also brought all the church directories since 1987. I think that was the first one we did. And we have all those directories here, and I have brought all of Luke's annuals from St. Martin's, and there's some pictures in there that you might be interested in. There's two missing, the 2 years that he was in Korea, or that he was in the Korean War. And he came back the next year and finished it, so his annuals are 48, 49, 50, and 53, and 56. 56 is his younger son. And I brought the scrapbooks that we made for the Knights of Columbus when he was Grand Knight. And one of them shows the banner that we made for the parking lot that year, the second year because he was Grand Knight. They're still using that banner. I have the 100-year diocese, we walk by faith. We have cookies and coffee up here that you're welcome to come up and have some, and then maybe 12 pictures, try two. And also I have one more thing, I have something for Michael. When we were talking about it, I talked to him several times about things up there, but he said it would be nice if we had a history up there at the church, so I would give a history. So Michael, if you'd like to cover them. So you should put that up to the church. And then Michael also has something else he wants to talk to you about.
Well, when Joan said she was going to put this program together, I thought, you know, there's several generations that are going to lose this history unless we have something in print. So thank you, Joan. I did not. Also, we're starting a new fundraising program for the chapel. We've got ongoing expenses up there. There's a brochure and a flyer on the table. It's called the 300 Club, and it's a buy-in. There'll be more details on the brochure. If any of you are interested in ongoing support for our chapel, or you know somebody that would be, just the annual expenses with insurance and utilities and stuff sometimes get overwhelming. We run completely on donations up there. So we're very thankful for all of those that have donated and continue. So thank you.
Do you have anything else? I was going to see if anybody had anything, a question or anything that they wanted to ask Joan. Here's a question.
You mentioned the old high school burn. I was the assistant fire chief on that fire, so if you want to blame somebody for it,
We got your number, don't we?
My father took a picture of that. Yeah, he was very good in history, so he took a picture of that.
Well, I have one story I was going to tell real quickly. I remember when I was old enough to get my first communion, Monsignor was still here. And I don't remember much about the Monsignor except he was terrifying. And he was missing several digits on his hand. And my mom referred to him as old two fingers. Not in front of us, but we'd hear, of course, and then we were even more terrified of him. But she had made a deal with him because I wasn't able to get into town to get to my week instruction for First Communion. And she had made a deal with him where she was going to instruct me at home, and she did. And we showed up, and I came running across the street up to this building, and I was excited because I was going to get my First Communion. And it was my first meeting with Father Vallo. And I was probably almost as tall as him already then, but I don't know if you remember Father Vallo very well. He was about this big. He's best described as a Danny DeVito in a priest collar. He really was. He was the best. I loved him. But he saw me and he introduced himself. I said, well, I'm here for my First Communion. Well, Monsignor hadn't told him that this was the deal that was being cut. He said, well, I can't give you a First Communion. And I just started bawling. Just bawling. And of course his heart broke and he was able, oh, no, never mind, come on in, and everything. But yeah, there was a real change of atmosphere for us us little kids at that point, because Father Mello was just such a wonderful, joyous person, and we just enjoyed the heck out of him. So, does anybody have any thoughts or memories that they want to share? Or?
I took instructions under Father Burrock, and I thought he was wonderful. He was not a bit dude. Yes, well, he was very good, I thought. And my daughter, Kathy, has been helping me. She's been running the PowerPoint for me, and she's helped me even. I had never put a PowerPoint together. She taught me how to do it. The weekend that she was here, because she's from Newcastle, so she doesn't get here as often as we'd like for her to. But anyway, she was married in this church too in 1984. 1984. And let's see, Mark was in 1976. And let's see. Jim was the other one. He was married in 1980 in this church. So, and like I said, I took instructions with Father Burbach about 2 years after I was married in the church. So it's been our church. And over there, you know, and the kids all took First Communion and were confirmed here. It's just been home. But now we have a new home over there, so. Anybody else have anything you want to say?